Welcome to another episode of the Less is More Sports podcast. Only this episode, I am a year older, and I would like to think a year wiser, but Matt may disagree with that statement.
No comment.
All right, continuing that I have to flex this birthday present that I got for myself. If you catch, yes, this is Zion Williamson's McDonald's All-American jersey that I got at a jersey store in the mall, whose name I am blanking, so I apologize if any of the workers of that store are listening. But I also got my son's high school jersey from Cartersville. I need to get his Clemson one too, but Matt, I'm sorry, I don't know if I can just bring myself to buy a Jaguars jersey.
I mean, they look cool. The Jaguar looks cool. It's a nice color scheme, and we'll know why you did it. We'll know. As long as you don't wear it on the day they play the Jaguars and jinx the team, then we're okay. We're okay.
I could pull like a Snoop Dogg and wear a USC jersey with like UCLA underwear or something like he did when Cordero was playing for the Bruins.
Exactly.
Do you think the fans would forgive me if I bought my son's gear?
I think they would. They'd understand.
I don't know. I saw the way they treated Andrew Luck. I don't know.
I think they'd be okay. Just get like a Colts headband or something and wear it,
I got a couple Colts hats. I think I could pull this off.
Really confuse them. Make them wonder. Then all you need is Texan shoes. I don't know if you can get those.
Oh, you can definitely have those. They make them custom on NFL Shop. Yeah.
Then do it. Just confuse everyone. Just be a fan of the AFC South, the worst division in sports.
I wouldn't go that far. I don't know. The NFC East might have something to say about that.
I don't know.
A team with no name won the division last year, Matt.
Hey, down they have Fitzmagic, and the Houston Texans are starting Tyrod Taylor. I think I know which one I'd rather be a part of. No offense to Tyrod Taylor. It's just, that's the white flag going up in the air.
I'm just glad to see him get away from that Chargers training staff after what happened last year.
Yeah. I feel like that was planned. I feel like there was some nefarious plotting going on there, but we'll talk more about that stuff later.
I was going to say, we might be moving a little too fast for this episode of the podcast and getting into some later details. But I want to, before we get into the main topic of today's show, I want to pick up a little bit where we left off because last week we talked about our college football predictions, and we officially now had the first week in college football. And we almost were about this close, Matt, this close to having arguably the story of the decade. And it came last night in the matchup against number 9 Notre Dame and Florida State. Florida State down double digits. Starting quarterback Jordan Travis gets his helmet taken off and has to come out for a play. Why is that significant? Because of who came in. Former UCF star quarterback McKenzie Milton, who, if we remember, several years ago had one of the most gruesome knee injuries that you will ever imagine. I mean, not only was there ligament damage, there was artery damage. Hell, the medical professional said it would be a miracle if he ever walked again without pain, let alone play football. But he was able to work his butt off, and the medical team performed a miracle, and now he is back playing football for Florida State University. But what made this story almost the story of the decade, trailing double digits, McKenzie Milton comes in, gets the hot hand, and leads an almost come-from-behind victory against a top 10 team in college football. And if it weren't for a missed kick in overtime, maybe he gets that upset, and we're talking.
Maybe.
But we'll never know. To the followers of this podcast on the social media page, much like I alluded to, I'm sorry, but sports are not like Disney movies. If it was, Florida State would have pulled out the win last night, but I'm sorry. There are other plans in life, and Disney movies do not meet every area of life, and that is including sports. But, what were some other thoughts you had about this week of college football?
I thought it was a pretty good opening weekend, all things considered. What really surprised me were like the two games that I thought were very intriguing ended up being like defensive struggle type games. I mean, I was glued. I was so happy to have Big Ten football back at the noon time slot. And it gave us a real treat with a 0-0 game until the third quarter, which is just what you would expect. And Penn State and Wisconsin, I mean, those are two teams who are going to be competing for the top spot in their respective divisions. And that game was just, it was a war of attrition in the best way possible. There were blocked field goals, there were interceptions. And I mean, each team really did try like to choke away the game at some point. And then the other team came away with a big turnover. And then, of course, the Clemson Georgia game, which, Les, you said this on your thing. It's really on your prediction list. It's really going to pave the way for a possible Cincinnati to slip in there, because not only did Clemson lose, but number 10 North Carolina went down. Miami got just obliterated by Alabama and Bryce Petty, who looked amazing.
Bryce Young.
And Bryce Young. He played for Baylor. For Baylor.
Yeah, he played for Baylor.
That's why I kept saying that. I was just like, I know there's a Bryce Petty, but Bryce
Petty was a very good college quarterback.
He was. The point is, the ACC had a terrible, terrible, no good, very bad weekend, and Clemson definitely didn't help that, but nobody helped Clemson either. The only thing that could redeem it is if Louisville somehow corrals Matt Corral tonight and beats Ole Miss, but I don't think that's going to happen. Sorry, Cards fans. So I really think that Clemson has knocked themselves out of a potential playoff conversation just because their schedule looks atrocious from this point. I mean, Florida State looked all right, but they still were down 38-20 at one point. I mean, now I know it's week one and we love to overreact after week one, but there just aren't a lot of games left for Clemson to rebound with. I mean, unless Miami really gets its crap together and looks very good and De'Aaron King looks like a Heisman contender, I think it's setting up quite nicely for Cincinnati to sneak in there, especially if they do beat Notre Dame and Indiana, who look very beatable. Both those teams do after their week one win, one loss. But I think that that's setting up nicely to make your prediction happen. So, and the other thing I was impressed with was just there were a lot of defensive superstars out there this weekend. We talked a lot about the offense, a lot of freshman quarterbacks, but just the gargantuan effort from the Georgia defense to shut down Clemson's offense. Now, granted, their offense got shut down too, but their defense made the bigger play, and you got to tip the hat to that. I mean, Alabama, 7 sacks in a row for Georgia? I mean, it was just impressive. And I mean, of course, we almost had an upset out west with Fresno State and Oregon. And of course, Thibodeau sprained his ankle in the high area, which no one wants to do. But he was impressive when he played. It was just an impressive opening weekend, even starting Thursday night. But we also saw some pretty bad injuries. The most notable one in my book was the one happened to Muhammad Ibrahim, who just showing that on the replay was horrible because he was having a hell of a game. But, and I will give people this, that the other big takeaway for me was both the ecstasy of having fans back and also the kind of the squirm you get in your stomach after the year we just had, especially with COVID and cases being up. It's amazing and it's great to see fans back in the stands, but at the same time you're kind of like, ugh. But I mean, it was just a great week one. The pageantry was back. We got some great individual performances. We got some great team performances, some great unit performances, and we already know almost what our storylines are going to be going through this season, especially with the Pac-12. Is it back? Is Ed Orgeron about to get fired? Is Clemson out of the playoff? I mean, what's going to happen? So, I mean, it set up a lot of great storylines. There were a lot of great performances. Fans were back and gave that atmosphere, even though I don't understand why that got so much emphasis. And, just to have everything back was just amazing. So it was a great weekend.
I couldn't agree more. And I'll go ahead and get my thoughts out of the way, and I'll start with my teams. It's very embarrassing for Duke football to have given Charlotte their first Power 5 victory in program history. Very disappointed. So I'll just go ahead and say that and then move on to my other team that actually looked good this weekend, and the Texas Longhorns. And don't worry, I'll keep it short and sweet so I don't sound like a complete Texas homer on this podcast. But the Sarkisian hire, the coaching staff hire gave me a lot the coaching staff that he brought in, I should say, should word that a little better, but it gave me a lot of reason to be optimistic with this tenure. And this first week against a ranked opponent and a team that's returning 19 of 22 starters, it looks pretty good to me. We knew what Bijan Robinson was going to do. The kid's an absolute monster, and a former Texas legend compared him to Ricky Williams. I don't know if I'd go that far. That's big praise, but Bijan is special. But the thing for me that stood out for me the most was Hudson Card's getting a lot of talk as arguably the best debut for a Texas quarterback in history. Don't know if I'd go that far. It looked good, but I think still a little bit of a reach. But what really stood out to me was our fundamentals and tackling, which is one of the big areas that I was emphasizing in the change of culture with the new coaching hires. And I saw them make fundamental tackles. They wrapped up. You didn't see a lot of missed tackles and broken tackles in that game. So I was overall pleased with their performance against the Cajuns. But overall, yes, I think you alluded to it perfectly, just seeing the fans back in the stands. Virginia Tech versus North Carolina, I mean, just to see that place rocking was special. And for them to pull the upset against a top 10 team in the country, would have loved to have been there that night. I'm sure the parties after the game were just nuts. And
Absolutely.
You know the best part about that game, Matt?
What?
It made one of my predictions look really good.
It
And
really
that
did.
Sam Howell will not be a Heisman finalist. So I have to point that out there. And, you know, being a Duke fan, I'm just absolutely loving pointing this out. I know we don't have a lot of room to talk, but hey, let me have my moment. I'm going to go from one dig to another dig. Look, Kentucky football fans, I know Stoops has, in a sense, rejuvenated the program. And there is reason to be excited for that, and I respect that. And I know that quarterback play has not been exceptionally good in recent years, but let's calm down about Will Levis's performance against Louisiana Monroe. Look, he had a great game. He put up good numbers, but it's Louisiana Monroe. Calm down. I know you're not used to throwing the ball. I mean, hell, against Louisville, they had 4 passing yards a couple years ago, but let's pump the brakes a little bit and see what he does against a team not named UL Monroe. I think that might be a fair statement to make.
Now you forget that he had to rebound though, because his first pass was an interception that gave UL Monroe their first lead since like 2017. I'm not making that up. I really think that was a stat they gave during the game. And Wan'Dale Robinson did look very impressive. I think he thinks he made the right decision getting the hell out of Lincoln and going to a place where he can win a few games. I mean, not an SEC championship, but at least a few games. So, and the one thing that Will Slovis is doing that is more amazing than anything I have ever seen in my entire life is he got a sideline reporter to eat a banana with the peel on because of his viral TikTok video that showed him eating bananas with the peel on. That he can make people now eat bananas with the peel on is almost more impressive than any pass he made in that game. I am not being facetious. I really think that is a freaking amazing. And I mean, Kentucky's schedule, they play Missouri next. He might repeat that. He may have a bit of a He may have a bit of a downturn, but I would not be surprised if he kept it up a little bit. So, you know, you're right. It is UL Monroe. But, you know, like we said, let's think about this. Charlotte beat Duke this weekend. North Dakota almost beat Kansas. Vanderbilt got slaughtered by East Tennessee State. And the number 20 team in the land, the Washington Huskies, blew it to the Montana team. So, I mean, you know, any given Saturday, you know, it could happen. It could happen.
And I remember, and I don't know how old you were when this game happened, but the famous Appalachian State upsets Michigan at the Big House game. So like you said, any given Saturday, anything can happen. But, you know, a couple other things that stood out to me. Obviously, we alluded to the Florida State Notre Dame game last night, and that was a great game. The defensive battle that was Clemson and Georgia. I see Clemson has not answered their offensive line issues from a season ago, and that's a reason to be concerning, and also another reason why I do not think they'll make the college football playoff. And last thing I'll say is this is a tweet that I was very proud of. Look, I watched Bryce Young play in high school at Mater Dei, and I was convinced right off the bat that he is a special player. So when he made his debut at Alabama, I got an update from the Score app that said Bryce Young is the real deal. So I took to Twitter, and the followers know this and have seen it already. I take to Twitter and I tag the score and then open quotation marks, Bryce Young is the real deal, close quotation marks. And then I put me, open quotation marks. Well, no shit, Sherlock, close quotation marks. I'm just saying, man, like if you had watched this kid at all in high school, you should not be surprised that he is the real deal. And not to mention, he does play for Alabama, where he's surrounded by so much talent every year. I think
I'm just thinking about Nick Saban in that hat, in that helmet. That was one of the greatest moments of the weekend.
I mean, that might have been more entertaining than the actual game, just because it was
really
curb stomping.
Oof. But yeah, I think what you're saying is right. I just think the problem is a lot of people don't watch a lot of high school football, and plus, I'm still recovering from the fact Gunnar Kiel was terrible. So I don't trust anyone.
So, in other news, you are not back. I'm sorry.
Which sucks, because I really like De'Aaron King. I really do.
I do too, and I think Miami. I was talking to one of my friends last night who was watching the game, the Florida State Notre Dame game. Sorry, and we were talking about those teams that college football just seems better when they're good, and then like Florida State and Miami do fit that mold. When the Seminoles and the Canes are good, there's just a different feel to college football. I think you could say the same thing about the USC Trojans and who else could we make?
And the Indiana Hoosiers.
You had to throw that in there, I know.
I didn't even have expectations, and they were still shattered. I don't even know, Laz. I don't know what I have to do, man.
I could be biased and say Texas, and I think some fans could agree, but I feel like...
No, I would agree. I would agree that Texas, when they're good, I call it the Patriots effect. When sports are generally better when you have someone to hate.
That's fair. But no, moving on from college football to high school football, where we take it to an ESPN. Do what?
As proof, no one watches high school football, or at least in the offices.
Yes, as proof no one watches high school football. Let's take it to high school football, where we rewind to an ESPN televised matchup between the powerhouse IMG Academy and Bishop Sycamore. And as if the final score wasn't bad enough, oh, buddy, we were in for a treat on what was to follow. As it turns out, I have I have a list of things ready to say about this. That so I don't want to leave anything out. But there has allegedly never been a Bishop Sycamore.
Ever.
They played 2 games in 3 days, which is got to be against some kind of high school football rule for one. All of them, yes. But except another thing is their head coach had an active arrest warrant, and most of the players were junior college dropouts that were nowhere near high school age. They were closer to my age than they were these high schoolers, and all that, and they still got curb stomped. Now, I get it, IMG is a powerhouse, but how embarrassing is that? You think you have a second chance at football only to get destroyed by a bunch of high schoolers. So... But
this is what last chance you should be.
Last chance you, Bishop Sycamore edition.
Sycamore.
But on to the topic of this podcast, Matt. How in the hell does ESPN broadcast a fake team? Please tell me, shed light on this topic, Matt.
Let's put on our magnifying glasses, shall we, and see how someone could be so stupid. So Bishop Sycamore is only a part of this tournament or this group of showcase games because they lie about the amount of Division I athletes they have on their roster. They sent ESPN a package saying they had many players in the Hot 100 and listed them out, and ESPN just went with it. They were like, "Oh yeah, they wouldn't lie about this. We just haven't heard of them yet." And so a school whose address goes to a residential building. They didn't even find a business front. They just put it in guy's house. Gets to play the number 1 team in high school football across the land. And they were saying, they interviewed one of the guys who was just like, yeah, I mean, they promised us we play a game. And Les, here's the kicker about that too. All ESPN had to do was look at the freaking other games they were playing and realize something was wrong. Because Bishop Sycamore was listed on their website as playing games at 3 a.m. in Alaska. The rest of their schedule featured games at 3 a.m., 6 a.m., midnight in Alaska and Utah and all kinds of places where the time zone just doesn't freaking match up. And ESPN was like the dog in that was like the meme dog in that room on fire, like, this is fine. I'm totally fine with the way events are shaping up right now. Let's air this game. To the point where they're apologizing in the middle of the game, like, we don't know how this happened. And in ESPN's defense, now here is an actual logistical take. The company that did broadcast the game is kind of like a mercenary that just sets everything up for ESPN, and then ESPN sends like Steve Levy or whatever. They come in, they broadcast, but the rest is handled by this kind of like camera for hire company. And I don't remember their name right now. It may be like Wyvern or something. So they were the ones who actually were like, oh, yeah, we'll put them on TV in our game and we'll do the production package for all that stuff. And, ESPN will be fine with it. And they're completely and blissfully unaware that they have put on a fake school. And I mean, I watched a little bit of that game not knowing what was going on. And it was absolutely amazing how outmatched a 25-year-old can be by a 16-year-old, because those guys just got whomped. There was no other word for it. It was a beatdown in every sense of the word. So in a way, the oversaturation of football and viewership in the market did it. In a way, it was a miscommunication between this production company and ESPN. The one thing I do know is that it is 100% hilarious. And that's what makes this story so juicy.
What was hilarious about this is before we got on this podcast, my girlfriend asked me the topic of today's show. And then so I mentioned Bishop Sycamore. And she goes, yeah, I heard about that. And she goes, what in the accepted the movie bullshit is that? And here's my thing. Being a former journalist, I'm not going to say the number one rule, but definitely a big rule is to always, and I mean always, check your sources. You check their previous games, and you can clearly see the times of those games in Alaska, of all places, when the school is listed in Ohio. I mean, that alone should be a red flag, not to mention the times at, like you said, 3, 12, 6 a.m. Who in the hell is playing a high school football game at that time? Most schools aren't even running two-a-days at those times or having morning workouts at those times, let alone playing a full-blown football game. Also,
I'm just, before you go on, I'm just thinking about Patrick in that episode of SpongeBob where he eats the Krabby Patty at 3 a.m. Who plays football at 3 a.m. in the morning? Bishop Sycamore's coach wakes up, oh boy, 3 a.m. Once he gets his play.
But also, they list a name of ESPN top 150 recruits. You can clearly look at those names and look at the list and be like, oh, that guy's not on there. That guy's not on there. That guy's not on there. So
that guy's not even real.
Right. This guy doesn't even exist. What is going on? It was not hard. And like you said, their school address is at somebody's house. You could Google Maps this shit right now and clearly see that it is not real. This is terrible reporting. And keep in mind, the best part about this, man, I know I'm screaming and ranting, but this is just how I think fired up and juicy this gets me right now. This is the same media outlet that pays people like Stephen A. Smith $10 million a year. This isn't me working for the Sentinel News making a beginning journalist salary. This is the biggest sports media outlet in the world, and they don't know how to check their sources. They let a bunch of 25, 26-year-olds play against the high school, especially in the middle of a pandemic. Yeah, I mean, if they're lying about their recruits, I know they're lying about being vaccinated. So clearly, this is much like I think the sideline reporter saying during the game is, yeah, we got to put a stop to this. This is a player safety issue as well. So there's just ESPN, I don't like to quote some of these shows, but or those radio shows where they give the donkey of the day, on the Breakfast Club, or the other some of the other shows where they give the loser of the day. But ESPN, I guess we could say the fail of the day, or the crying Jordan meme of the day goes to ESPN. That could be our new slogan if we give like a fail of the day, the crying Jordan meme of the day.
No, we should do that. The only thing that would have made this whole thing better is like the ESPN announcers get the roster and it's like now playing wide receiver Air Bud. At the other, Teen Wolf.
Or they
Bad
get that old
Bear.
they get that old Key and Peele skit where they're just like making all these college names. Harvard University, DeVry University, or DeBrickashaw Ferguson, or whatever. No, actually, I think that was a real player.
DeBrickashaw Ferguson's a real player. He played for the Jets.
I know he went number 4 overall to the Jets, but there is some player.
We do not tolerate that slander.
I'm sorry, DeBrickashaw Ferguson, if you are watching this. I really liked watching you in college. I mean, but you do.
You were a great offensive lineman. Right there next to Nick Mangold, the glory years of the Jets.
Yeah, and then Darrelle Revis went to the Patriots, and they just have not been the same since.
That was it. That was the curse.
Actually, no, the curse was when I think Rex Ryan got the Mark Sanchez tattoo. I think that's what.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
Les,
the other thing, going back to the other topic, I went to a Christian school that was private, and I think that's a misconception a lot of people have about private schools, and you went to one too. Everyone assumes that the private school is like yours, which was rich, fairly well organized, computers is what I meant to say. Great football, great athletic programs. And mine was not like that at all. I graduated with 25 other kids, and we were one of the biggest classes in the history of my school. We ran on Windows 98 in 2016. I mean, it wasn't exactly what you think. And there were schools who were and are, smaller than us, and dare I even say shadier than us. And it's actually kind of easier to fake it till you make it than you think when it comes to athletics because, and I'm not going to spill my guts about anything because, what happened. I'm sure the statute of limitations is passed, but I mean, I knew teams who would play 8th graders at the high school level. One time a 6th grader played against one of our teams from another school, and that 6th grader dropped 60 points on our high school team.
Okay, where's that kid playing now?
I don't know. We lost track. But, with charter schools and things like that, it's a little bit easier to pull off a scam like this than you would think because there's just many hoops you have to jump through. There's so much out there that a lot of people just don't know about it. They just assume private schools have like this never-ending wealth of money from boosters and donors, and it's just not true. No. A lot of it is, strategic use of that, and what we call, enhancing reality, which most people call lying. But there are other ways, or using phrases that can be a little bit misconstrued, and that's just how it works at that level. And the only thing I could think of is, we had some very good basketball players on my team. We should have gone on TV and gone up to La Lumiere and lost like 99-0. I mean, then we would have at least been out there, we could have, and we had guys who were better than what I saw in Bishop Sycamore at the basketball level. Or, if every guy in my high school when I was there played football, I still don't think we would have a full roster. We would have like half a roster. But that's all I could think of. Was like, we should have done this. We should have played St. X and lost like 175-0. It would have been fun.
But you know what the one difference between your school and Bishop Sycamore is? You all actually exist.
That's true. That's
what I'm saying. I understand like there some of those frauds that you speak of, the minor ones, getting players to play for you that don't actually go to the school. I understand some of that just kind of squeaks through the cracks or sips through the cracks, whatever that phrase is that I'm blanking on right now because I'm so hyped up on this topic. Yes. But some of those minor deals, they're easy to get a hold of. But to have a fake high school play on a nationally televised ESPN high school football game is crazy to me. And to do it against the number 1 team in the country is absolutely ridiculous. And it is a complete crying Jordan meme fail for ESPN, period. End of story. But I know you weren't disagreeing with me, but I'm still just hyped up from this topic. I'm speaking to you, ESPN. This is why less is more, sports is better.
Les should be in charge of the network. Les should be in charge of the network. Instead of Sports Center, it's just less center. Everything is Duke and crying Jordan over and over, and a little bit of Texas.
Or what they could do to redeem themselves is, give you and me both a job, our own show on ESPN. That would be great.
We'll be well, I mean, we could pull that off. They could put us in like the 3:00 slot. We could do it.
Oh, for sure. I mean,
Until we got fired.
would have a following if we get on ESPN. I mean, you and I are both very likable people. I mean, I had a lot of people wishing me happy birthday. So, I mean, I think some people do like me. So I think we'll have a lot of viewers right off the bat.
This is how we judge our popularity in the age of social media. How many people told me happy birthday?
I had people calling me at 12:01, yes, midnight, and then
no,
calling me, telling me happy birthday. So I must have made an impact on my life.
I think most of my friends know if they did that I would be rather unhappy with them because I'm usually asleep. So I would be like, why are you calling me at 12:01? I'm trying to get some sleep. Do you want me to have a good birthday, or do you want me to go like full Karen on some guy at a restaurant because I didn't get my full 8 hours? What do you want from me?
Well, I don't want to assume genders, but I feel like you'd be a Kyle, not a Karen.
You know what I mean. No, I hate how people are like, I feel like Matt is the male equivalent of a Karen. It's like, I'm a good person, damn it.
No.
I'm a good noodle.
No, it is Kyle's and Ethan's, let me tell you. And
Ethan's.
before anyone gets offended, my brother's name is Ethan. So there's reasons I say this.
Okay.
That's not the only reason, but I know a lot of Ethans. And and one of them is going to be watching this podcast, and he knows who he is. Yeah, I'm talking.
You know who you are, Ethan.
Yes,
I'm very disappointed in you.
Just like the person who put Odell Beckham in the stand bracket, you know who you are.
He knows who he is.
Yes, and now the Ethan I'm referring to, you know who you are.
And we're very disappointed in you.
He's probably going to watch this and be like, Matt, I don't even know you.
I'm disappointed
in you.
He should just know that somewhere there's some guy in Indiana who's walking around like, man, I am really disappointed in Ethan right now.
He's probably going to be thinking like some about those Indiana guys. You got a coach in Indiana saying he wants to execute players, and now you got this Matt guy in Indiana who's calling me out.
Okay, but that was funny. That was funny.
I'm sorry, but because I was like tweeting about the game and Tierney caught it, not me. And she's like, did he really just say that? And I was like, wait, what? And she goes, it'll probably be on Twitter in about 5 seconds. So then I literally go on Twitter and see that. I'm like, he really just said that. Brian Kelly really is out here wanting to execute his players, man. That is crazy.
So to contextualize that for people who aren't familiar with it, long ago in the 4 long days of the NFL, before Tom Brady was a Tampa Bay Buccaneer, so about a year, in the 1976, the Buccaneers started their 10 years as an NFL team with the longest losing streak in the history of the league. And at one point, former college coach and current Buccaneers coach John McKay was asked about his team's execution of on-field plays, to which he responded, their execution, I'm in favor of it, due to his tongue-in-cheek kind of soundbite nature of the late 1970s and early 1980s. And what was so jarring about hearing Brian Kelly trying to make a joke is that Brian Kelly does not joke. Or Brian Kelly. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's Brian Kelly.
Brian Kelly. He is so stone-faced 98% of the time that when he did it, it was kind of like, was that a joke? What the hell is going on with this man right now? So I totally understand why people were very confused by that because, you're a guy who's not really known for his hilarious one-liners, and you're cracking a joke from a coach who coached in the NFL in 1976. And at the press conference, he's in shock that nobody got the joke. And I'm like, dude, 1976. I don't think many people know who Leroy Selman is anymore. Just let it go, dude. You told a bad joke. Just say, give the context and don't get mad over it. Just keep moving.
I think what made it worse was that awkward stare down he gave Katie George after that, which shout out to Katie George. She graduated Assumption the same year I graduated St. X, and she's doing great things with her life. So big shout out to you. But that awkward stare down that he gave Katie George, I was like, yeah, that's not creepy at all. So, I mean, if you were cracking a joke, you definitely put a big elephant in the room.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you make one as dated and as strange as that one, Brian Kelly. That's just Don't do that. Never tell jokes again, Brian Kelly. You are banned from telling jokes. You are only allowed to speak in coaching platitudes like we left it all on the field or we gave 110%. That's it.
I was about to say, Brian Kelly, you are canceled, but I also hate cancel culture, and I don't think that would be the appropriate term to use. So, gonna definitely do what Brian Kelly should have done and just pretend I didn't say it and move on.
Good move.
Take notes, Brian Kelly. But anyways, this moves us into the favorite part of every viewer's section of this podcast, and that is our top 5 and how we are attributing the main topic to this top 5. Since Bishop Sycamore had to conspire their way to get ESPN to televise this event. Did I say that right? Conspire. Yeah.
Conspire would be the better grammar.
Yeah. Apparently, you would think my grammar would be a little better having a journalism degree, but sorry, things happen. I am still from Kentucky, so where we still say y'all instead of you all. So that's my excuse. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. So, anyways, our top 5. Since Bishop Sycamore wanted to conspire their way into getting televised by ESPN, Matt and I are going to give our top 5 sports conspiracy theories. And much like every week with this top 5, I think the viewers are in for a treat.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm going first. Or are you going first?
Yeah, go ahead. You're the host. You should always go first.
But I'm Kentucky raised. I was raised to let my guests go first. But you know what? You insist that I go first, so I don't.
I do. You usually hit the ones that people actually care about, and then I'm like, y'all hear about this thing that happened in 1965?
Well,
they're like, no.
That's why we love you, Matt. You bring up things that other people wouldn't know, and they're like, whoa, that's actually really interesting. This Matt guy is insanely smart. I like him. That's why everyone loves Matt.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone loves Matt at all, but
no, that's a lie. Stop capping.
Okay. Capping? I'm not capping anything. I don't even know what that means.
Keep in mind, Matt is younger than me, and I'm using the young terms here.
I just found out what no cap means. Now you're telling me there is a cap? What is going on here?
Okay, no cap means no lie, so capping means you're lying.
Oh. So no. Yeah. That is not fleek, Les. That is not fleek.
He gets on me for saying cap, and now he uses fleek, bro. You gotta love it. This is why we watch this podcast.
No one is. You're all on fleek.
Oh man, that made the entire show right there. That might even be the headline to promote this episode. Matt's on.
You're
fleek.
all on fleek.
Specifically, Matt is on fleek.
Well, I am. These pics are always the fire emoji.
All right, I'm gonna get into it I'm gonna get into this. So before
I kill Les.
Before I die of laughter, I'm gonna get into my list. So kicking it off with my number 5, and this is a conspiracy theory that I absolutely hate because it is so easily debunked, and I mean very easily debunked, almost as easy as if ESPN did any research at all into Bishop Sycamore. How easy it would have been to figure out this is a fake high school. And we're going to take this back. We're not really yes, we are going to take this back to 2012, 2013. I'm kind of blanking on the year. But we're all familiar with Chris Paul, one of the best point guards of this generation who still has yet to have a ring. But outside of his last run with the Phoenix Suns, his best chance might have come in 2012 or 2013, whichever year it was. Sorry if I'm not getting the year right. When he was almost traded to the Los Angeles Lakers to join Kobe Bryant. However, the NBA vetoed the trade and he had to settle for the cursed Clippers instead. Now, the conspiracy theory behind that is that after Kobe won his 5th ring, that would have mean he would needed one more to tie Michael Jordan with 6. Sorry, math 101. Sorry, guys. Didn't mean to make y'all feel stupid or anything. But anyways, point of the story is that the theory is that David Stern vetoed the trade so that Kobe Bryant would not equal Michael Jordan in championship rings. Here why that is debunked. If you remember, the formerly known New Orleans Hornets were under new management and had just fired their GM and were in search of a new GM. And then the Lakers tried to pull a fast one and get Chris Paul from the Hornets without a proper GM to manage this trade. So David Stern since then protected the Hornets so that they wouldn't get absolutely robbed and just gutted in this Chris Paul trade. So he vetoed it. And by the time that they did have a management, the paperwork that had been filled out for that trade had missed its expiration date. And by the time that they were going to refile the paperwork, he was already signed to the Clippers. So that is why that conspiracy is false. And I had to get that off my conscience first, because I absolutely hate it. And if you watch this podcast, you now know to never mention that conspiracy to me ever, because it is not true at all. And it is proven not true. But anyways, now on to one I hate to one that actually does make sense. We all remember Michael Jordan had just won his first three-peat, was on top of the basketball world, and then shockingly decides to retire to play baseball. His story to the public is that his father had just passed away, his father being a huge baseball fan. He always promised his father that he would play baseball to honor him. Here's where the conspiracy comes in. As we all know, Michael Jordan loves to gamble. He was in deep with the Sharks. Some media even went as far as to blame his father's death on his gambling addiction, which I think was way too far and totally uncalled for. Not the time or place to do that. But anyways, so the theory is that Jordan got so deep into gambling and with the Sharks that David Stern had to take action and suspend him for 2 seasons. However, being that Michael Jordan was at the height of his career, the most popular basketball player on the entire planet, a big contributor to globalizing basketball, you don't just go suspend that guy. So they made it look like so David Stern, the theory is David Stern had a conversation with Michael Jordan, told him to go act like you're retired for 2 years, go play baseball. You always said you always want to go play baseball. When your suspension's up, come right back. And essentially that's what happened. He came back, won 3 more championships, and went on to be as some consider the greatest player that's ever lived. But the conspiracy is that Michael Jordan never actually retired from basketball the first time, and that he was actually suspended by the league, but to save ratings and popularity, they made it look like he retired from the game only to come back. That one at least makes sense. Number 3, and this one I actually do believe is true as well, and that sticking to the NBA, ironically enough, the NBA rigged the NBA draft in favor of the Cleveland Cavaliers the years LeBron was in Miami, so that they could draft several first overall picks to rebuild a team for that when LeBron would eventually return to Cleveland. Oh, think of that ratings grab. LeBron returns home, and he's got 3 first-round picks to come back to. Only, unfortunately, 2 of them didn't pan out, but that's not part of the theory. But he did win a championship with one of those first-round picks, and that is Kyrie Irving.
And now they hate each other.
And yes, and now they apparently, well, I don't think LeBron hates him. I think it's more Kyrie was jealous of LeBron's spotlight. And I'm sorry, Kyrie, he's LeBron James. That's just not how it's going to work. And now you've teamed up with Kevin Durant, so I don't really know what good that did, but okay. Number 2, we're going to take it to the Super Bowl against the San Francisco 49ers and Baltimore Ravens. When the lights went out, the conspiracy is that game was on purpose. I mean, that lights out was on purpose. And that is because it was a 28-6 game. It was a otherwise boring Super Bowl, really, not a lot of drama or excitement. So someone just wanted to hit the lights, make it exciting, get somebody talking. And also the 49ers would rally after the lights came back on and made the game a lot more interesting. Only ended up being a 34-31 game, which I do want to point out that I did predict the final score of that game. So it's somewhere on my Twitter page. If you want to go back almost 10 years. So if you want to go and find it, go right ahead.
Yeah, that's totally worth the effort.
You know, I have had people find like old tweets that I sent, and I'm just like, dude, how much time do you have on your hands, bro? Come on.
That's intense.
I know. I think that it goes to show that I'm getting some level of fame here with this podcast, so maybe we'll see. But anyways, on to my number one. And
coming from me.
I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I'm going to go to rugby. And I'm going to go with the food poisoning problem that New Zealand's rugby football team ran into. And in the website that I got this from, and this is exactly how it is quoted on this website, in Maize and Brew. So I want to shout out to you all. Doesn't sound like the most credible source out there, but you know what? It's okay because it's very welly described.
At least you didn't get it from Bishop Sycamore.
Very true. Imagine the miracle on ice. But if the Russians were intentionally food poisoned, and you have what some people believe took place and with New Zealand's rugby team lost in the 1995 World Cup final, giving South Africa a victory in the sport's most iconic moment. That's pretty intense, Matt.
It is.
Shout out to Maize and Brew for definitely giving that great headline to that story. So if that doesn't tell you enough, yes, I think that perfectly describes the event and wraps up my top 5 conspiracy theories in sports. I almost could have gone into that sports are rigged, but I feel like that's a very, very broad topic, and we could go on for days about that. Come on.
Oh, well, good, because I have a lot of sports are rigged on my list. Secondly, that number one sounds a lot like the whole LeBron got cramps in San Antonio because they turned off the air conditioner. Remember that?
I almost put that one.
I love that one. I don't know why. I just love that one.
I feel like a lot more would have had to take place for LeBron to specifically get cramps than just turning off the AC. Because why didn't Dwayne Wade get cramps? Why didn't Chris Bosh get cramps? I know LeBron's got a lot of muscles in those legs, but that brings me to like a memory that I had watching that game. They tried to get Reggie Miller to knock LeBron on that, and he said they asked him, did you ever have to miss a important game for cramps? And he goes, well, that requires me having muscles in my legs that LeBron has that I don't. I just loved it from Reggie Miller, just to snap back. Reggie
Miller's a smart man. That's why we love him.
That's why we love Reggie Miller, even though he is a Pacer and I am a Heat fan.
I'm a Pacer guy. I like Reggie Miller. He makes me laugh. That's all I ask. And now, for our top 5 of sports is totally rigged, and here's why. It's my list. All right, Les. So it's my number 5. We're going back to the 90s again, an event we've talked about many times with some context this time. So keep in mind, in 1992 and 1993, we've had a back-to-back champion in the Toronto Blue Jays. And in 1994, the Montreal Expos, led by a young man named Pedro Martinez, look like they're about to destroy the entire league and go ahead and win 3 straight World Series for the lovely country of Canada. And at this point, before the whole steroid home run boom kind of happens, baseball's in a little bit of a tough spot. People are watching us more, NFL is growing in popularity, and if another team from Canada brings another title home to Montreal instead of Toronto, it's going to look even worse because America's pastime has been taken over by their neighbor to the north. So the MLB uses a small labor dispute to totally lock out the season and prevent the Montreal Expos from winning the 1994 World Series in order to keep America's pastime American. They use that whole small labor dispute over like free agency and salary caps to make sure America's pastime stays in the confines of America, and to give them time to restructure deals to make sure American players will stay with their teams. So that's my number 5, because I think it's ludicrous because of how fans reacted to that lockout, which was pure, unbridled anger. And although it is interesting to think about, like, what would happen if they have 3 straight Canadian champions? I mean, number one, there'd probably still be a Montreal Expo team in Montreal, and we'd still have Youppi, who's one of the best mascots I've ever seen, roaming around the dugouts of MLB baseball games. it just doesn't make much sense to me because, like I said, you lose all that revenue on the World Series. You got nothing but ire from the fans. But it is interesting to think about why someone would intentionally tank their season just because they didn't want Canada to win a championship. It would be like the NBA claiming that they needed to lock out before Toronto won. Just doesn't make much sense, but it is interesting to talk about.
But obviously, the field which behind the NBA being global is a lot different than America's pastime, clearly, in that scenario. But
Hooray. Number 4. Here's someone we've talked about a lot on the show too, and that is Muhammad Ali and his title fights and his amazing ability to be the best boxer of all time. But some people think that one of those fights that he won the title on may have a little bit more to it than what was led on. This theory is that Sonny Liston owed the Mafia so much money, he purposely bet against himself, told the mob to bet against him as well, and then took a phantom punch from Muhammad Ali in that famous photo where he's on the mat to lose the World Heavyweight Championship, pay off his gambling debts, and propel Muhammad Ali to new heights so that way he could make more money. Now, I don't know much about Sonny Liston, I'm not going to lie, but we do know that like the older and further back you get in sports, the more shady it gets. I mean, we had NYU's point shaving scandal, we had the Black Sox scandal, and I know this is still in the 1960s we're talking about, but still, it was kind of like the Wild West back then. There wasn't as much regulation as there is today.
when you look
And
at
when you
Boston College, you remember that ESPN documentary, that 30
Oh yeah, that's right.
playing for the mob.
That was point shaving too. So I mean, it seems, especially in a sport like boxing, which already has kind of a less than stellar reputation, that it would make some sense for that to happen. So, and when you look at the punch Ali throws that eventually knocks Liston to the mat, it's kind of like, yeah, it is kind of suspicious. It doesn't hit the way you think it should hit him, but he still goes down. So that's why that's my number 4, because I think there's a lot of intrigue that goes around it. And number 3,
Good pick.
and at number 3, there are very few things in the sport more beloved in baseball than Cal Ripken Jr.'s Iron Man streak. But what if I told you that only happened because the Orioles committed a conspiracy of epic proportions that involved Dances with Wolves, Kevin Costner, and Angry, Angry Love? Because that's what some people say. The night that one of the nights Cal Ripken was close to setting the record for the Iron Man streak, he was nowhere to be found. And so the Orioles intentionally sabotaged their lighting system to get the game postponed to a time when Cal Ripken Jr. could appear at shortstop in the game. Now you may be wondering to yourself, how could a clear-cut, clean living individual like Cal Ripken Jr. not be at his own game when he's about to set the Iron Man streak? Well, that's because he was too busy beating up Kevin Costner for having some fun with his wife. Now this is actually a fairly popular one because Cal Ripken Jr. actually did have to speak out and say, I've never even met Kevin Costner. But there are at least a few photos of him hanging out with Kevin Costner in a box with his wife at various sporting events. So, I don't think it's entirely impossible that maybe that did happen and the Orioles were complicit in sabotaging their light system for a game to keep their superstar happy and keep his Iron Man streak intact. So, yeah, that's one I think is kind of possible. So,
I think that's one of the most believable ones, personally.
Really, it is, because, like I said, there's photographs of those two guys together. There's photographs of Kevin Costner and Cal Ripken's wife talking to each other. The lights really did go out mysteriously at Camden Park, and Cal Ripken really wasn't there. This wasn't like a fake conspiracy. He wasn't there. And some people even say he flew in on a helicopter a little bit later. So it's like, what's going on here? Where was he at? Where was he out with that helicopter? Will we ever know? So I think the Cal Ripken's Iron Man streak being preserved by deception would be a really good conspiracy that we need an answer to. And at number 2, I have probably the most believable conspiracy theory of any sporting one I've ever heard, which is that NASCAR purposely rigged the 1984 Daytona 500 to have Richard Petty win. And there's a lot of socioeconomic stuff going in here, so brace yourself for this. Richard Petty was very good friends with a guy named Ronald Reagan, who happened to be president of the United States. So much so that after campaigning for him so much, Ronald Reagan decided he wanted to go to a NASCAR game and pick the Daytona 500. It would make the most sense for NASCAR to put themselves in line with a very popular president who had just really demolished the popular vote during his first election in 1980. It would make a lot of sense for them to put their eggs in that basket. And so Richard Petty is very good friends with Mr. Reagan. They've campaigned together. They kind of have like this American ethos, whatever the hell that means, and stuff like that going for them. And so Bobby Allison, who's leading the race with a few laps to go, allegedly misjudges how much fuel he has. He has enough fuel to win, but he doesn't think he does, and mysteriously goes off on pit row too early. And his pit stop takes much longer than normal, long enough for Richard Petty to come and take the lead, and for Bobby Allison and several other drivers to fall behind in the race. And so Richard Petty wins the Daytona 500 and goes to meet his friend, Ronald Reagan, who is the first president to be sitting at a NASCAR race like that. And they go to each other at the post game and shake hands, and it's all great like that. But Bobby Allison's pit makes no sense. He's a championship driver. He's won this race before. He knows this track like the back of his hand. Why would he misjudge how much fuel he has? It almost makes it sound like they paid him to do that, so we could have our heartfelt moment between two old buddies who love America and love NASCAR and get in good with the President of the United States. And I think that's really possible because I think NASCAR has actually rigged races in the 2000s. In 2004, Dale Jr. won a race under some mysterious circumstances after the tragic passing of his father. So I think NASCAR, at least in 1984 and possibly in 2004, changed the outcome of a race to make themselves have more of a mythos, an ethos of Americana, and get in bed with powerful political allies. I mean, I think that one makes a lot of sense.
I agree as well. And it goes to show that ratings and power and money control everything. I think if we've learned anything from our top five, this is why things are rigged or why these conspiracies happen and why unexpected outcomes do happen. But at the same time, I'm torn with which one I believe more, because the Ripken one makes a lot of sense to me as well.
Oh, wait, I got my number one, though. You're going to like this one.
Well, I thought you were on number one, or did I miscount instead of misjudge?
You miscount. This is number one, and it's probably the least sensical of them all because there's a popular legend that the Jets and Colts Super Bowl III, was rigged by the NFL to make pretty boy Joe Namath the Super Bowl champion and make the AFL look good just before the 1970 merger began. And this all comes from mostly Bubba Franks' book and a few testimonials from people who started on the O-line for the Colts, who say that it just doesn't make any sense how they lost because Earl Morrall, who was the 1969 NFL MVP and the quarterback of the Colts, errantly missed several throws and almost allowed himself to be sacked 3 times. Once Don Shula actually, and people couldn't even justify how John Shula got out-coached during that game. Don Shula, of course, one of the great coaches. He's famous for Miami, but he started in Baltimore, and people are just confused by that because they said that his game plan was executed just perfectly. And most damning of all is that those players, Bubba Smith and most of the Colts offensive line, distinctly remember a play where Earl Morrall intentionally missed a wide open receiver by throwing the other direction, almost like he was trying to throw off the game, which is something your MVP candidate doesn't do. But why would the NFL cause such a shocking upset? Number one, betting, because, the more if you bet on the team that loses or the team that wins in an upset, you get more money. 2, Joe Namath was controversial, but a rising superstar who was in movies, in film, had the sideburns, had the hair, had the swagger, made a prediction, etc., etc. Guys like that were going to be the future of the league anyway. And number 3, to make the AFL look like they were worth merging with, so people would take them seriously before they merged leagues in 1970, and people would, respect the AFL, give the AFL money, and thusly give the NFL money. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not. Even Don Shula himself said that's the dumbest bleep I've ever heard when he's always asked about it. But It does make some sense. You could have a big team. You could set up two teams in New York from two different divisions who are both winners. You're setting in motion the face of the league and stuff like that. And in Super Bowl V, the Baltimore Colts became just won a horrible game where a player from the Cowboys, the team they beat, was the MVP because they played so horribly and they still won. So it makes you wonder maybe if they got a little bit of kickback from taking the dive in 1969. So that's my favorite conspiracy theory for some reason, is that Joe Namath's one Super Bowl came because the NFL wanted to make a little bit more off the top and set themselves into being a respectable sports league when they merged with the AFL. Now, do I believe it? I don't know, because we'll never know what happens behind closed doors.
And it also puts even more into context that famously before that matchup between the Jets and the Colts, Joe Namath confidently predicts a victory over the heavily favored Colts.
Yep.
Maybe it puts something into perspective that he knew something that we don't. But maybe that's the
Little
conspiracy coming out of both of us.
It could be. Play the X-Files music.
Oh, man. But
We don't
anyways,
have that. Yeah.
those are me and Matt's top 5 conspiracy theories in sports. I'm sure you all have plenty of your own, so please comment them in the comment section below. Be sure to follow both me and Matt on Facebook, Twitter, and any form of social media. And if you do like what you hear from the podcast, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel to get updates for all new episodes. But
you will be very fleek.
We will be very fleek.
You will be the fleek if you do this.
Oh, the cringe. Oh, the cringe. But that's all the time we got for today. So me and Matt are out.
Goodbye, friends. I almost hit the leave button. That would have been bad.